it.
Okay, everybody, we're going to get started. Everybody, welcome. This is the second event in a series of legal technology events put on by HAL and Jolt and a lot of really great student organizations. I was wondering actually if everyone in the audience of the HAL members could quickly stand up. Sorry to make you put you in the spotlight, but if where are you guys? Yeah. If you guys have any questions, make sure to ask them. They're really friendly. They're great. We love them. They put together and help put together this amazing event. I'm going to pass it on to Professor Wilkins. You guys can totally stay. I'm going to pass to Professor Wilkins. He'll introduce the panelists, give you guys a bit of a primer. Keep getting food. I know it's going to be a little bit loud, but we'll try and make sure that we can hear everyone. Okay, welcome.
Thank you, Amy, and thank you all for being here. I think just the very fact that this room is packed to the capacity and beyond capacity is a testament to this terrific organization, which has really energized, I think, people around these really important issues, but it's also a testament to all of you, not only because you know where the best food is, because HAL always has great food, but also because you really want to learn what's going on in this field and how innovation, new kinds of careers, how these terrific people are driving change in the profession, because this is going to be the change that affects you. So please go ahead and get your food. I'm going to kind of roam around, so there's one extra seat here you can take which has my name on it. But what I thought I would do, by the way, I'm David Wilkins. I've been a professor here for longer than most of you have been alive. Let's just leave it at that. I run something called the Center on the Legal Profession, and we've also been trying to understand what's happening out there in the world of innovation. And so I thought I would just take a few minutes to give you some background and then move to our terrific panel. So, there's been a lot of talk about disruption and innovation, and all of that is really important. But I want to argue that it's in some ways both over and under inclusive, okay? It's under inclusive in the fact that it acts as though lawyers are at the center of the universe. Surprise, that lawyers think lawyers are at the center of the universe, and that the whole thing, yes, Madam President particularly, you gotta see. Don't you just love that there are 2 women presidents in this organization? Okay, it's really important message. All right, back to the show. But the things that are happening to lawyers are happening to the whole world. Globalization, the rise of information technology, the kind of blurring together of traditional, separate things like law and business or public and private. That's happening everywhere. Why shouldn't it affect the legal profession, right? On the other hand, not everything is going to change, and not everything should change. There's a reason why we call it the rule of law, okay? That implies that there's some continuity, right? So here's the challenge. How do you try to understand how these forces of continuity and change are going to affect the legal profession? And to do that, I'm going to argue that you have to have some idea about not just how to talk about innovation or how to think about it, but how to operationalize it. And that's why we have this terrific panel here today, right? And this is what every general counsel, managing partner, and other senior leader in a legal organization I know is thinking about. Now, here's the thing. Innovation is hard to talk about because it means different things to different people. So, clients, and we'll talk about this when I ask Alejandra here, when they talk about innovation, they mean, how do we get more for less? Okay? How do we get more, better legal services for less money? When law firms talk about innovation, and I'll talk to Peggy about this, they mean, how can we increase profitability? How can we generate more income for the work that we do? It's not that these two things are diametrically opposed or can never coexist, but they're not the same thing, right? Moreover, innovation is not just technology. Yes, technology is really important, but technology is a tool. And the question is, how is that tool going to be used? When I said this in a meeting of innovation professionals back in June, which I'll tell you about in a second, the guy jumped up and said, yes, I tell my partners this all the time, technology is just a tool. And then he said, and a fool with a tool is still a fool. Okay? And I say it's a more dangerous fool, because now they have a cool tool. So we can't get trapped in the shiny new toy syndrome, and I'll talk a little bit about that. We've got kind of too many hammers looking for nails, too many cool technologies, but nobody knows exactly how they're going to be used or what they're going to be used for, right? And then there are fundamentally different kinds of innovation depending upon where you are on your innovation journey. So most of you know Clayton Christensen. He's the one that talked about disruptive innovation, but he contrasted that to what he called sustaining innovation, which allows incumbents to do what they already do better. Sustaining innovation is actually very important for ongoing organizations. It's also just dangerous because it can blind you to true disruptions, which oftentimes come from the outside with new technologies reframing what legal organizations are going to look like. But my colleague Ron Dolan, who I hope all of you know and is going to be here in the spring teaching this great course called Law 2.0, even if you can't get in it, you should try to meet Ron while he's here. He's a former Google guy. I always tease him, he was employee number 47 at Google, which means two things. He's very smart and very rich. But he also went back to law school to study the intersection of law and technology. And he says, we ought to keep in mind that there's something what he calls adaptive innovation, which starts from the client perspective. And then from that perspective changes not just what lawyers do, but how they do it. This will remind many of you of design thinking and design thinking principles, and that's one of the things I'll be interested to talk to our panel about. And in the foreseeable future, I think it's that kind of innovation that's most relevant to where the legal profession is today. If you're going to have new legal innovation, you got to have people who drive the change, right? So people in this room probably know what CLOC is, the Corporate Legal Operations Consortium. I was just in a meeting with 40 lawyers from a law firm, which will go nameless. Nobody knew what this was, okay? This is probably one of the most important new developments on the legal scene today, right? And it's exploding in size. It started with 10 lawyers sitting around a lunch table in Silicon Valley. Just in March, they had 2,500 members come to Las Vegas for their convention, and they're opening offices in places like London, Hong Kong, and Singapore, okay? These are innovation professionals whose job it is to bring innovation to the legal profession, particularly starting with inside legal departments, both reforming their own work, but also reforming the work of their relationship with outside firms. And in part reacting to this, we see many law firms, I'm going to ask Peggy if they have one of these, creating new roles like Chief Innovation Officer to try to bring innovation inside law firms. But there's very little systematic information about this development, and that's where we come in. We're a research organization, and so what we've been trying to do is to study who are these new innovation professionals? Where do they come from? What are their credentials? What's their charge? How much is their budget? Is there a difference between those in companies and law firms? We've got kind of 3 ongoing projects. One I'm going to speak very briefly about, which is a survey of professionals in law firms and companies. Second, we've run a series of colloquia in which we brought these people together, and we have actually somebody who was at our Google colloquium in June, where we had 40 innovation professionals from law firms and 40 more from companies, and trying to think about 2 big issues. One, what's a career path in innovation? If you're going to do innovation, if you're going to bring innovation professionals, you have to say what's their opportunity, what's their career path inside a legal organization. It's never really existed before. And on this one, you'll be happy to know that we brought Nea, what's Nea's last name? I forgot Nea's last name. She's going to kill me because she's my student, but we brought her to the colloquium, and she wants to be an innovation professional. And we said, she's patient number 1. Convince Nea why she should turn down her offer at Latham and Watkins to come work as an innovation professional in your organization. She has degrees from MIT, she has lots of tech expertise, a degree from Harvard Law School. What is a career path? This is something I'm going to ask Steve about, who's living that life. And the second is, how do we measure success? And particularly not just cost, but quality. What are our metrics of quality? And how are we comparing not just the quality of innovations, but the quality of the actual legal work that lawyers do? Because if you compare a new innovation to a perfect thing done by lawyers, well, lawyers are not perfect, last I checked. Especially not at 3 in the morning when they're doing much of their work, as you know. Okay. We're also running a bunch of pilot projects inside companies and law firms. We're working with IDEO, which is the premier design thinking firm. And you can read all about it because all of you have a subscription to our digital magazine, The Practice, which you can claim, where we're going to report all of these results. And I just want to say a little bit about what we're learning about these new rules and what they mean for legal careers like yours. So, first, we ask, what are legal operations teams charged with in companies? And look at what the biggest thing is. Project management, law firm relationships, knowledge management. AI, machine learning, in other words, shiny new toys, it's there, but it's not nearly at the big or most important thing that the companies care about. But if you look at what the law firm people are doing, and by the way, we have over 200 responses to this survey, so it's pretty robust. AI and machine learning is the biggest part, shiny new toys. And these other parts are much smaller. Okay, you see the mismatch that is potentially going on. Second, we asked, do you collaborate at all if you're in a company with your law firms? 55% of them said no, okay? And of those that did, mostly, oh man, I'm tearing down the walls. Tear down that wall, anyway. 50% are only doing law firm management, 17% are doing e-discovery, and most people are working with the relationship partner, and relationship partners mostly don't know much about what's going on here, which means there's a lot of opportunity, okay? But doing so will require new lawyers like you to understand what's happening in the world. Well, that's why we're lucky, because we have a fantastic panel. So, people who have different perspectives to talk about this important new development. So, Steve Fleming is the CTO of Opus 2 International, and I'll let him tell you a little bit more about that. Peggy Giunta, sorry, I should have practiced that beforehand, is the Chief of Legal Personnel and Development Officer and Chief Practice Management Officer. You have even more titles than I do at WilmerHale. And Alejandra Parra-Orlandoni, pretty good.
Beautiful.
All right, Associate General Counsel at Quantum and Black. So, let's discuss, okay? So, Alejandra, I said I would start with you, because you're the voice of the client here. And my view is clients are the ones that are driving this change. And if you just look at clock, you can see the explosion is mostly inside internal legal departments, and often those people are reporting directly to the general counsel and are quite powerful. So tell us both, first, a little bit about yourself, and then second, are you seeing this in your organization?
Thank you for the introduction. I am Alejandra. I'm in-house at Quantum Black, which is a subsidiary of McKinsey & Company, the big consulting firm. It's really interesting to hear this discussion because Quantum Black is, they focus on AI and advanced analytics, and they do a lot of cutting-edge work for big-name clients. Work is just, cutting edge, tip of the spear, all of those classic idioms that you could throw in there. I work with them, I support them, and as you can imagine, legal support is not nearly quite as cutting edge or tip of the spear and so on and so forth as the work that the people I serve are actually doing. So one of the biggest innovations that we've seen, David mentioned earlier that biggest innovation doesn't necessarily mean technology-based. One of the biggest innovations that we've seen is this shift toward an agile mindset, which is agile is often used in connection with software development and other technology world things. It's not really often referred to when you think about legal support. So we've tried to shift to this Agile Mindset. And what does that mean exactly? Well, we're figuring this out as we go, as many innovations happen. But one of the things that we really try to do is make sure we're embedded into the business and included as thought partners. Well, what does that mean? Well, it means that when my folks are starting to develop a brand new technology asset, or they're speaking with a new client and thinking about this brand new use case where they're going to develop this AI model that's going to revolutionize business, rather than bringing me in to the conversation after the fact, after the planning has been done, after everything's been, all the ideas have been formed, I want them to, and now they're increasingly, bringing me in earlier and including me in conversations so we can think about compliance by design, so we can think about different perspectives. I think almost everyone in this room, just being in the world of the law school, or in the world of the law in general, is in some way, shape, or form attuned to a lot of the ethics and AI conversations and so on and so forth. My company makes AI. And so a lot of the times these ethics issues and fairness issues and bias issues that aren't purely legal but are certainly sometimes legal and definitely tangential to legal issues are important and arise in all of the work that we do. And so really what we're just trying to get at is having more of a partnership relationship between the legal folks and the business folks so we can pivot quickly and make decisions and changes and message everything correctly so we don't start saying things that will get us into trouble, in the near term or even in the long term. So that's been kind of the biggest innovation, and out of that comes some implications. For example, how do we structure the support? We're a big big firm. I just came from a law firm fairly recently, so I still say law firm. McKinsey calls itself the firm, so confused all the time. But we're a fairly big firm, and so we have a pretty large legal department. I serve just one business unit, but I have colleagues that serve all sorts of other analytics and digital-related business units within McKinsey. And so how do we embed ourselves correctly in a very complex organization? How do we ensure that we're supportive and agile as we want to be? And so with that comes things like technology that's going to support our legal support to our business stakeholders. And it can get quite difficult, and Steve and Peggy, I'm sure, will have a lot to say about all of that. And then, I'm glad I just turned to look at Peggy, because that reminds me that there are things that we just can't handle in-house, either because we don't have the deep knowledge for it, or because, especially in connection with litigation, we just don't have the resources to do it. And so then how do we connect with outside counsel? I can tell you that for the most part, outside of the realm of litigation, where we really do sync up well with outside counsel support, we don't have a great relationship with outside counsel. Not to say that we don't like each other, but meaning we're not. They're not part of our agile thing, and so increasingly we're starting to figure out how to do that. We have some counsel that provides us with great support through blogs and video trainings, kind of short, bite-sized things, and we try to, in certain very specific and specialized areas, we start to build a partnership with a particular law firm partner or law firm associate. But for the most part, it's kind of a one-off relationship, because I don't think we've figured out how quite to make the support fit. So all to say that biggest innovation, trying to become agile, just like my business stakeholders are, and become part of the thought partnering process. How we actually make that happen is a lot of trial and tribulation, a lot of successes and a lot of failures. But it's a combination of structure, management, technology, and then I think part of it will necessarily be strengthening the relationship with outside counsel, particularly as certain issues in my field become more and more complex. AI regulation exists, but it's going to probably continue to become more and more complex, and we're going to have to rely on someone to kind of help school us, because law firms really are usually at the tip of the spear on a lot of issues. So I'll stop there.
So thank you. I will say this: the term du jour a few years ago was disruptive innovation. Then it's design thinking. Now it's agile. And I was just in Singapore, where they had the head of PwC's human resource consulting practice come and talk to a bunch of managing partners. And she talked what a lot of big organizations are doing around agile working, and it really blew the minds of everybody there. So I'd say invest in learning something about what this means, because it's coming to organizations that are connected to you, whether those are your clients or businesses that you want to work with, or even in legal organizations, it's going to be more and more important. Steve, you heard me just do this thing about the importance of innovation professionals and whatever, and then lo and behold, we have an innovation professional here. And I'm very curious as to how you think, kind of your own journey into this role, but also what you think about those two issues that I put on the table, which is, what does a career in innovation look like for a CTO in a kind of a legal organization? And then what are you doing to try to help your organization measure the quality of legal services? I'd be curious on both dimensions. So Steve.
Sure, thank you. Okay, so I'm Steve Fleming. I'm the CTO of a company called Opus 2, and we actually provide a technology platform. I'd say that it's the world's most advanced technology platform for dispute management, so electronic trials and things of that nature. The platform's called Opus 2 Magnum. For any Latin aficionados, there is a story behind that, but if you couldn't tell already, we're a British company, and we didn't quite get all the connotations that name might bring to the US market, so that's a separate story. So basically, we've been sort of trying to digitize. I suppose digital transformation was one of those sort of buzzwords that has been left in the dust a little bit now, but there are still many projects and corporations across the world which are trying to drive these initiatives. And look, if you walk into any law firm across the globe, you're going to see reams and reams of paper everywhere, still to this day. We're not quite beyond that step yet. So often when you're approaching problems like digital transformation and getting people out of that world, you need to have like a first rung on the kind of technology ladder, which is sort of replicating what they do now, but in a digital world. And then you can begin to augment that and really start to drive those behavioral sort of changes that are so difficult to force upon lawyers. So if you think of maybe just go through the obstacles, I suppose, to actually driving innovation. And I think the biggest one, getting people to adopt new working practices and embrace, terms like collaboration for all that means, is one of psychology. Actually getting lawyers to change their habits is the most difficult thing. And again, I'm sure Peggy will be able to opine on this better than I. But so what you find is, you've got folks who will, say 5 years ago, a lawyer may think nothing of just grabbing, attaching a bunch of documents to an email, and shipping those out of the firm and sending off to a third party. So in disputes, that might be an expert or co-counsel, someone of that nature. And again, changing those practices is, you get pressures from various different areas that have to sort of force change. One is, of course, information security and all of that kind of stuff. It's really difficult to get lawyers to change. What they truly need, I think, is a compelling reason to leave the world that they know and embrace the world of the future. And that's putting paper down and saying, oh, hey, I can do the stuff I did in paper now in this new app or system or whatever, right? So that's been, I think, that was our biggest hook, is delivering a simple benefit with a minimal learning curve. That's the kind of key, really, to getting folks on the train. And it's our CEO is a fan of many an analogy, but one of his biggest ones is it's no good kind of delivering the works of Shakespeare in terms of technology to a market that's still learning to read and write in that world. So a second barrier, I think, is then the legacy systems that exist. amongst in every law firm, in every corporation, really. You've got a lot. Well, paper is one of them, but then you've got a heap of other sort of technology tools that the firms have invested heavily in over the years, and a lot of these things are just dying on the vine. While the world is moving, way beyond things like email, for example. It's just an archaic form of communication, and yet it's the day-to-day bread and butter of what a lawyer will do. So, I mean, I've just recently I was in a law firm speaking to a firm in London with an innovation professional, as it happens, who they've had to change their working practices based on what the client wants. So, actually, a lot of their stuff they do is now through WhatsApp, and that's how they communicate with their client, or things like Slack. Is another great tool for that kind of thing. And what that sort of feeds into then is if you do find a tool that it provides value, and you'd like to adopt that across the firm and roll it out enterprise-wide, corporate buy-in, for want of a better term, but actually having a plan to roll out the software, getting a few users to use it first, champion the thing, etc. I've seen it. You can easily sell something with a bit of AI sizzle on top, and then the law firm says, "Hey, great, we need that," right? You can see, everyone's rushing and scrambling to get some of these tools, but without a cogent plan to actually implement these tools, it can fall flat on its face. And we've suffered that as much as anyone because for various different reasons. I think when it then comes back to sort of these innovation roles and really the skills that you need to help adopt these new technologies and bring law firms into a new world, I would say you probably expect me to say, hey, you should learn coding or something like that. Unless that's your area of law, it's not necessary. I think technical fluency is definitely one that the modern lawyer is going to need. Flexibility, when you do walk into a firm, you'll be surprised where some of them stand in terms of their innovation initiatives. And like you say, everybody's looking at it, absolutely, but people are at sort of different stages in terms of their implementation. And then just to sort of finish off, I think one skill that's worth having is kind of the courage to say, okay, hey, maybe I don't like being a lawyer quite so much, you've signed up. It's not quite what you expected. What I mean by this is we've got a number of people in our company who jumped over the fence and came, took a step out of being a lawyer, and it wasn't for them, so they've come across to us. And two members of our exec team are ex-litigators, and we had one chap recently who joined us doing a sort of corporate legal initiative with us. He spent a year and a half with us and then landed an innovation role, kind of went full circle, went back to a firm. And I think having that breadth of knowledge about how it operates, on all sides is really, really useful. That's something you can carry forward.
I just want to really emphasize what Steve said, which is a lot of this is about psychology. Mm-hmm. And, it's about having the courage to fail. Because the first time you try a new technology, guess what? You're probably not going to be very good at it, right? Mm-hmm. And lawyers are not very good at failing, In fact, because people like me tell you fail, you're out, you're worthless, trap door is going to open up and you're going to fall into the underclass and never to be heard from again. But in fact, in the rest of the world, failure is like essential in order for growth and development and trying new things. So again, it's not that technology is important, but it's also not that everyone should learn how to code. It should be that people should be fluent in technologies, understand what they do, what they can do, what their risks are, what the benefits are, and then have the courage to try them. That's a much easier standard than figuring out how you're going to turn yourself from being an English literature major and 3 years of law school into a coder. So, Peggy, but speaking of those English literature majors or political science majors or people set in their ways who don't like to change, you preside over them. In fact, you have several titles which put you in charge of all those people. And so
we live
how are
this every day.
You doing? Yeah, what's happening? So talk a little bit first about what those titles mean and maybe how you got there, and then how are you at a very, very, very fine law firm trying to deal with this change coming at you while still running a very successful law firm, which my bet is had its most successful year last year.
Okay. A very successful year last year. So, so I have officially broken our internal internet system because I have so many titles, as they told me. But and like you, Professor Wilkins, I've been at the firm longer than most of the people in the room have been alive. But so I have two titles. The Chief Legal Talent Officer is predictable, what you expect. I'm responsible for the firm-wide hiring of the lawyers across all of our offices, compensation, promotion, evaluations, just what you would think. But I'm the Chief Practice Management Officer as well, and that really is our group that focuses on providing all of the resources, technology, and services to help our legal practices do their work day to day. So from that perspective, that's more in the innovation area, and I have had that role longer than the talent officer. I actually started working in this area back in the late 90s. And that is at a time when somebody who was very well known to this firm, Bill Lee, was the managing partner of the firm and had a vision that the practices needed to operate more like businesses. So created a few roles, and from that, that was an innovation in law firms at the time, that a non-partner would have a role to help manage the day-to-day operations of each major practice. And so I helped develop that, and then eventually thought, well, these practices really need to understand the talent that we needed. So that's how I have both roles, so they're intersected. And so as we evaluate our young lawyers, the business managers kind of know what is the need for the firm. And I would say it is a challenge. It is psychology, because I think as lawyers, there are certain characteristics, traits. There's been many research done around this, but lawyers, as you know, are highly skeptical off the scale of skepticism and off the scale of resilience.
And if you don't believe that, you just proved the point.
That's right. And there's many studies with that. And I'm married to a lawyer too, so I know it, so for sure. And I've always wondered, is it the characteristic of the person who chooses to go into the field of law, or is it just as you practice law, that is how you are more successful. But and also resilience is another characteristic that lawyers are off the scale of the average person. And so,
but in the opposite direction.
In the opposite,
meaning
right?
not
resilient, right?
Yeah, you were saying.
So highly skeptical and not resilient.
I'm starting to feel good about myself.
I know. So when you're trying to be innovative and take a risk, these two very important. You have to be willing to risk and fail, and so not being highly skeptical and not being resilient means innovation is tough in a law firm. And I also agree that I think for us, we don't tend to talk about it as innovation too much, because knowing that I think our more senior lawyers think of innovation as your Apple Watch, or some Uber, or some disruption, and how does that even happen in a law firm? So we are really looking at the pain points that our lawyers have in dealing with their clients, and how can we help you resolve that? And through that, we're able to design some innovations in either staffing mechanisms. We have actually created off-track roles to handle certain types of transactional work and e-discovery work, to make the experience of our on-track lawyers a little better, not being everyone has to know how to do that, but it allows us to service our clients better, to dealing with lots of different technologies. We're very practice specific, so we each practice, our corporate and transactional versus our litigation versus our regulatory, have different needs, so it's not one size fits all. But we are developing, we have a set of competencies for all of our young lawyers, and we've had what we call it's called matter management. We've had it for years, but over the last 4 years, with just the rise of clock and the emphasis the in-house counsel are placing on these issues, it's a prominent evaluation area that we work with for our young lawyers, and we are doing lots of training around it. And so I would just, you really do need to have these skills to be successful. It's as important as writing. And for me to say that, at this, especially my firm, writing is probably one of the most important skills that our young lawyers are evaluated on. And more and more, it's having the ability to understand technology and value. What value are you adding?
Do you evaluate them on that?
Yeah, it's part of the evaluation form. Yeah, and it's we have it evolves. So as a young lawyer, we define very specifically what we think that means, and as you become closer and closer to partner level, it just becomes more complicated.
So the reason I ask this is, I think for many of the young people in the room, and we're going to turn to you guys in a minute, so please be thinking about questions. They hear a lot of talk from people like you about how these things are valued, but then when it actually comes down to it, that they're evaluated on how many hours they bill by a very traditional set of metrics around, whether people think they're smart enough or they write well enough or whatever, and that how innovative they are is not typically on the menu. And I think that's a challenge for thinking about, if you're going to break this cultural idea, how are you going to bring these qualities kind of into the mainstream? So listen, I'm going to ask each of my panelists to reflect on this thing, and then I'm going to actually open it up to all of you, so please be thinking about questions. We're very lucky here. We have somebody from a law firm, somebody from an in-house legal department, and somebody from a technology company, roughly speaking. And we've talked a lot about pain points here, and I wonder what each of you would like to see from the other parts of the ecosystem here that would help you to be able to drive change in the way that you would like to do so. So, Alejandra, I'm going to start with you because you work with law firms, but you also work with technology companies. And one of the little boxes up there on my chart, which when the thing comes out, you can study it intensely and take it home at night and read it to your children or whatever, is the lack of the right technologies. And Steve already alluded to this. There's a lot of technology that was bought like 2 years ago, which is still sitting in a box someplace, right? So what, as you see as an in-house person, what would you like to see more of from your law firm partners and from technology partners that would help you to do your job better? And then I'm going to ask each of the other participants, and then I'm going to open it up to the audience.
It's a good question. I have to respond by saying that first and foremost, from an in-house perspective, one of the biggest pain points doesn't directly answer your question, but it's to get people in-house on board with affecting any changes or adopting new practices or trying something new, things that everyone on the panel has alluded to already. I think that's the biggest pain point, and that's unfortunately something that I think has to come from within, but can be helped with the right packaging of things from technologies and from law firms. And I think from my perspective, one of the most challenging issues for bringing on new technologies is, aside from being able to sell it to people in-house, so putting that aside, is to see how it fits in with something that's already in place, because there's, Steve alluded to this already, there are legacy systems, and so there might be this great system that is 50% new, but 50% overlaps with something else, but that something else also does this other thing that we still need it for. And so onboarding new technology, that's great, but then overlaps and creates a conflict and requires us to know 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 systems. It's that lack of end-to-end solution for X, Y, or Z, for contract management, for litigation management, for whatever, I think is the biggest pain point. I think that technology seems to be really zooming along and being able to answer that prayer, but I think that's really the biggest pain point. With respect to outside counsel, my experience has been great, but I think it's more about figuring out in-house how we want to work with outside counsel.
Thank you. So Steve, from your perspective.
Yeah, so interesting that the point that you just made there about having kind of an end-to-end solution. That's always the corporate dream. Give me the one big thing, all things to all men. It's very difficult to build that.
I know it is.
Yeah, it's a bit like saying, well, you've got Microsoft blah, 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 to use everything. No one wants to use all the Microsoft stuff. I use Word, I use Outlook, and, it's a best-of-breed approach that I think, from a software perspective, that's really what you want to do, and that's interoperability, interconnectability. But to your point, I think, to the question, I think the biggest thing that we crave, I guess, on our side of the fence is a partnership. I think the days of being a vendor it's just, it's a smelly word. It's horrible. It's full of ball game tickets and let's make that sale and boom, on to the next thing. Post-sales for us is the most critical function really within our business, making sure clients are speaking still to the same people that brought them on board the train. Let's get you comfortable. Client success is the catch-all term for it here in the States. Don't think that flies in the UK. I've been trying, but it's just like account management there. For us, I think it's as I said, being seen as a partner, not as a software vendor. If you're just dealing with the IT team at a law firm, you're a vendor. What you really are looking to do is add value and drive change change those lawyers' behaviours. So having the right intermediary on the law firm side, and actually increasingly we're seeing now those innovation roles spring up. We've been involved in a couple of tech incubators with law firms. There's a couple in London. This really interesting kind of way of solving some of those, identifying use cases across different practice areas like verification in corporate legal. It's a really dirty, horrible job that is very, very manual, and you get a load of junior lawyers on it. So actually building a system that can tackle that, and again, plugging it into everything else is key. So yeah, just having that partnership is critical.
So Peggy, what about you? How do you both hear these, but also what would you like to see from clients and also from these new producers, new technology producers?
So I think what's challenging for law firms is each client has a different set of expectations. And so for us to try to build an internal system that allows us to mine data is challenging. So, an example is, this is, very boring, but task code. So, we have a client who wanted to know, you guys do thousands of depositions a year. You should be able to tell me in this kind of case how much a deposition costs.
Right.
I mean, our partners don't, for a partner at a law firm like mine to get a question like, he has to know or she has to know how much a deposition costs, it's like, what? I'm doing this strategy, but we need to help figure that out. And so to do that, it's very basic. When you're doing your time entry, you have to do a task code, but each client often has a different sets of expectations around that, and it's a drag for our lawyers to have to do that. And so we've been successful sometimes in saying, well, you use ours, and all that. But I think I know that this is something Clock is trying to tackle, some of these issues across firms. There's antitrust laws, of course, that like for certain things come into play. But I think that is a barrier that we have right now in terms of collaborating across the different streams that we have here, trying to provide data.
Terrific. Well, listen, there's a lot on the table here. Floor is open. Yeah, please, sir.
I have a question for Peggy. So you talked about Bill Lee in the 90s, his vision being that law firm, WilmerHale looking more like businesses. Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering what exactly that entail, in concrete
terms,
strategies.
Yep.
Also with Alejandra, you mentioned that he's sort of defined agility as legal teams and business teams working together earlier on. So do you think that's also the future? That's been do you see it as law firms doing more of the same path, in your opinion?
Do you want me to go first?
Yeah.
So law firms are partnerships, and so many times they're very loosely organized groups of individual partners who are running their practices, and then there's management team, and but there's often they were run by committees. The partner is in charge of finance committee or marketing committee, and so Bill and other leaders in the firm had a view that we should really be operating more like a traditional business. So a real chief financial officer who had authority. It's around giving people authority in the professional roles, so that if I have authority and a partner came to me and wanted to do something that I did not think was in the best interest of the organization, I could push back and say, this isn't good. That, the 90s, it is kind of a long time ago, but it's not that long ago that, to have some of these changes. And there are some firms today that still aren't even that professional, they're not organized that way. So I think what it's allowed us to do is to push forward some of these changes with respect to adopting technology. We do have an analytics department now where we're trying to we have a tremendous amount of data in our firm. Just think about all the time entry that we have. It's huge. So we are building a data warehouse. There's lots of things that we're doing that we could not have done without a leadership thinking that, we are organized and we can go out and build an IS department. We can build a finance department that's traditional to a corporation.
I think your question about law firms moving in the agile direction is actually a very interesting one. I worked at 2 different law firms before going in-house. The first was more traditional white shoe firm. The second served venture capitalists and startups. And so very different type of approach. The first was a bit more of what you think, what you think of when you think of legal practice, some big company calling for some help on a particular matter and you provide advice, and a partner that's more senior is really driving the strategy and you're kind of executing on the minutia and some of the details as a junior lawyer. My second law firm was much more of this approach, this agile approach where you're really embedded in the business, not for all of the clients, by the way, but for a lot of them, in part because they're startups, and so they require a lot more guidance, and they usually don't have in-house legal counsel to point them in the right direction, and so they rely entirely on outside counsel. I think, though, that where the question of whether that's the future of law firm support will go, it's a lot to do with pricing. Because even as a very junior lawyer at a law firm, I was really expensive per the 6-minute increment. And so having an agile lawyer who's embedded in the business, if you build it by the minute or by the 6-minute increment, would cost a lot of money, and probably not something that the client would be willing to pay if they could just pay a salary of someone with equivalent talent to go in-house. So I think your question's really interesting, but it largely depends on what the client needs and then what the law firm could potentially offer in a way that makes sense financially, not just support, not legal support wise, but also financially for the client.
Yeah.
A question to all of you is, it's really fascinating. You come from very different perspectives. The question is, sitting where you sit and knowing what you know, will the billable hour model survive this wave of innovation?
Come on, who wants to answer that?
I can go really quickly.
You go fast.
Because that's not really my bag. But I think we've seen actually one of the reasons some people are looking to optimize and make their practices more efficient by adopting new technologies is because the model is changing. And this has forever been a trend that sways a little bit.
They've been predicting the death of the visible hour ever since I started.
It's the paperless office. It's a work in progress. But so I think for us it's a nice thing to latch on to. But I think there are certain firms who I think have done it really well. And there's a few that use our technology and actually pass through all the cost. They don't invest in our technology at all. They actually pass it all through on a transactional basis to each client per matter, which is quite an interesting way of not having that sort of enterprise level strategic investment. Let's roll this out to 1,000 users. It is kind of a bit more agile and allows them to kind of test drive the car and so on. But that doesn't really answer your question all that much.
I would say, so this is intriguing. So currently I think 16% of our matters are, billed on an alternative fee basis. That's a very broad definition.
But aren't those just shadow hours though?
Yes, right. No, it's really hard. No, there is a pricing, it is a budget, and all that, but it's not where, to your point, it's not where it should be. And clients are still requiring, so even if we said, okay, we're going to bill you $100,000 for this deal, many of our clients still require the detailed time entry behind it because they don't trust it. And so, or they don't want to be, taken, So I think
Which
part
of
of
course shows that they have not gotten their head around alternative pricing in the slightest.
Right.
Come to that.
Yeah, and I would just say, not because, but generationally you're at a different level, but I would say part of the challenge is many of the general counsel at the larger clients have come from private firms. And so they understand the pricing, model, and so for them, it's just really hard for them to understand, because they know what they did as a partner. So I hoping that Clock actually can kind of help with this process of changing it, because I think it's going to help with lots of different issues that we have around retaining people in the law firm and allowing, people to ramp down and ramp up, and there's lots of other issues that the bill that impacts. So I'm hopeful before I retire.
So is the client who's going to be driving all this, Alejandra?
I think so.
I will add that it would be my dream if billable hours were obliterated. I haven't been out of law firms that long. I still remember one of the happiest things about my job right now is no billable hours. Really, it's like up there in the top 3. And I loved both of my law firms, but billable hours is terrible. But hearing the reflections of Peggy and Steve makes me think that one of the things that I think may drive a change away from billable hours ultimately, and this is, I don't know if I really think this or if I hope this, I'm not sure, but I hope at least that we move away from it, because I really think that the value add of a lawyer needs to be recalibrated. I think that's what this kind of agile mindset approach is trying to get at. For very, in a lot of ways, the legal services that lawyers bring to the table have been commoditized. You get X amount of work for X amount of money. We measure it in time. But sometimes the value add that a lawyer can bring is priceless. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's a bit more mundane. But I think recalibrating what that value actually is might help move away from trying to measure the value add by the hour.
So this is why I think, because it's my project, you can take it for what it's worth, that the Quality Metrics Project is the most important project out there. It drives everything else. Because right now we only measure quality in law 2 ways. One, completely input-based. Who does it? What's their reputation? How many times have they done it before? And how many hours does it take to produce? Okay? And the second is completely subjective. That is, all our output measures are completely subjective. Like, I know it when I see it. I know it's a great brief. I know it's a great argument. Which I often tell people then, if your best output-based quality metric is most identified with Justice Stewart's definition of pornography, you're in trouble. Okay? And that's kind of where the legal profession is. And then people say, but you can't measure outcomes. It's too complicated. There are too many factors. Oh, like flying an airplane? You can't measure, that's simple, or building a 100-story building. There's millions of things that have millions of outcomes. In medicine, they have a whole thing around trying to measure quality outputs and measure. So, that too. The last thing, though, I'll say about hours is, hours are used, don't forget, for 2 purposes. One is to build clients, but the second is to evaluate lawyer work. And there's been a lot of focus on the second one, but there's been very little focus on the first one, and you could give up the second one and drive up hours on the first one by saying people have to work harder in order to produce more efficient outcomes to produce flat fees. So it has to be both things if we're gonna do this. All right, yes, please.
Hi, my name is Dixie Morris, and I'm a 1L. Thank you all for coming to talk. It was Peggy who mentioned that lawyers need to be better at becoming resilient and risk-taking and proficient with, well, that was what you implied.
Yeah, I did.
Proficient with technology. And so I'd be interested to hear the opinions of anyone who wants to talk about it, about how law students and also young lawyers can kind of flex those muscles and try and develop and work on those particular skills.
That's a terrific question. So please, and this will be kind of the last one, so use it as an opportunity to give advice to these amazing students who've come here to listen. So, Steve.
Yeah. So I think it's tricky to walk into a law firm as a trainee or a lawyer or sort of a fresh face and say, oh, this is trash, what you're doing, we're going to paper, seriously, let's use this thing. You're not really going to fly, but I think increasingly, actually, just bringing it back to that tech incubation hubs, one of the best things when you're presenting a technology to a law firm or a different way of working in innovation, call it, I think the best meeting you can ever have is when you've got a cross-section from across the firm. And that goes partner, associate, paralegals are there, and then all the lights are going off because there's different aspects of what you're showing them that resonate, and they kind of these things get lost and forgotten as people kind of move up the chain. So when I think you've got that group consensus about what can take you forward and sort of make you more efficient, that's great. I don't know the inner mechanics of a law firm, and maybe that's best for Peggy to kind of give her views on how you can sort of influence it from the inside. But we are seeing, I think, in those in those tech incubation hubs, we get a full cross section from across the firm, and it's really, really helpful because everybody's voice is heard.
It's a bit of a hard question. I think, to Steve's point, more and more firms are thinking, internally about we have to think about technology differently. Ours recently was from an effort that we did to understand how people are working remotely. So everybody works remotely now. You either have to work remotely for business, or you're at home, and it was from the technology perspective, but just also the professional development perspective. As more people are not all in the same place, and our older partners don't understand that you can develop somebody even if they're not in the same place, and we staff across offices. So through that effort, we're actually going to establish a technology committee internally with our younger lawyers to get thinking about, because in these meetings, they started talking about all these solutions that they had to working remotely and what they had on their phone, and we were actually finding that our IS team wasn't even training people in this. So I think you just, as you have ideas about, you should just, it's hard just embrace new technology and not be afraid to suggest something, that, hey, I'm using this, I think we could benefit from it. In our firm, we just encourage that, but it's hard for me to say exactly.
Well, that's very helpful. Alejandra, do you want to give the last word?
I would just add that, for you personally and others here, you have this, you're in a great law school, so, getting job afterward, pretty low risk, high chance, everything's going to work out. So use this opportunity to learn things that you might not think fit into what you originally pictured when you got here on the first day. Use this, use your 3 years or however many years you have left to take a random class because it sounds interesting, to learn something new, to get involved in projects where you get to actually practice what you learn in the classroom. And I think through those types of experiences here in school, where you're not really committing to anything long term, you can then start to learn more about what's happening out there, learn how to convey different messages and speak to folks with different perspectives, and then bring to the table what you've learned during your time here to wherever you end up working, and try to bring some from different innovative perspectives when you get there. So this is a great time to just try new things, learn new things, and think of it as this low risk way for you to dive into topics that you might not otherwise have done, if you didn't have the freedom to do so.
I think that is terrific advice, and it's a terrific place to end what I hope you will agree with me has been a terrific panel. Please help me thank you. And thanks to all the HALP organizers. You do a really amazing job. Thank you.
Thank you again, Professor Wilkins.